What is going on today, everybody? I want to discuss some of the common problems that you will experience owning a Cherokee. Now, these aren't going to pertain to every single year. I'll try to, have some of the model years that will have these issues and whatnot. Now, I did make a video a little while back on things to look for when buying these Jeeps, and I kind of mentioned, the common problems in that video as well. But I want to make a designated common problems, with these Jeep Cherokees here. That way, in case you already have one and maybe you just want to know what type of problems you may have, you have this video for reference. So I guess first things first, we'll just, we'll start with the exterior and we'll work our way into the inside and, mechanical stuff. So, outside. First thing, let's just get the big elephant right out of the room right now, rust. You want to look for rust on these Cherokees. They're prone for it. Now, obviously, depending on what state you're in, you're going to have different rust issues, and another state, California is not going to have the same exact rust as New England and things like that. So depending on what state you're in, the rust may be not too bad or a lot more severe. Now, I am in Jersey. It's one of the states that is considered the salt belt, so they salt the roads, and people used these to drive in the snow because obviously they're four-wheel drive, or most of them four-wheel drive. So definitely rust is a common problem on these. Now, I have seen Cherokees that aren't that rusted. Sometimes you get a lucky one and the person that owned it took really good care of it. They always sprayed the underside and took care of it pretty well, and they're not too rusted out, but for the most part they're usually pretty rusty. This one isn't too bad. Whoever had this either didn't drive it in the wintertime too often, or he tried to keep it as clean as he could when he did drive it, because this one's fairly clean. It does have rust though. But look underneath. The floors are the number one thing that goes. You can see here's my rug. I mean, it does have some holes, but it's not terrible. But the floors, number one, the floors always go. That's the biggest rust spot on these, I'd say, is the floors. The rockers will go. As you can see, the side is cut out because the guy wanted to do a rock slider on here, but this rocker was rusted, I'm sure. You want to check the frame. These are a uniframe, also known as a unibody. They're not really a true unibody, they're more a uniframe, but the frame can get holes in it, so definitely keep an eye on that, because if you have holes in your frame, I would just say forget about the Jeep. If you have holes in your floor, it's not necessarily something to walk away from. It's repairable. As you can see, here's my rocker here. It's slightly rusted. A lot of this though is just cosmetic. The floors aren't really cosmetic. You should really fix your floors. It's not, you don't have to if you have a, as long as your driver's side is good. I guess that's really all that matters at the end of the day. But, keep an eye out for rust on these. And they all get rust in common places. Like I said, the floors, the hatch area rusts. The newer style, the older ones, from what I've seen, don't tend to do it as much. Mine is cut and folded, but if you actually had this quarter panel here, the newer ones, they always get a rust hole, right around here. Right around behind that plastic cladding. The Cherokee would be perfect, no rust anywhere, and there's always a rust hole right here. So that's probably the first spot on the newer style Cherokees. On the old style, I don't see it as much, but you can still rust in the quarter panels. The rust along the wheel wells here, I've seen that. And that's, I'd say, kind of the main rust areas really on these, besides the floors. That's really all they rust, is really the floors. The frame can get bad, but usually if you take care of it quick enough, the frame won't be too bad. And they rust here along this, quarter panel here. My other side has a little bit of rot. I will get that fixed, but these, the two doors, you have a two-door, they'll rot out here. If you have a four-door, they won't rot there because there's another door, obviously. But they will also rust along the bottom of the doors. So as you can see, my doors, these are pretty clean, but they do rust along the bottom of the doors as well. So those are really the common rust areas. I have seen them rust along the rails up here, or also on this. I have a little tiny bit right here that's starting to bubble. I'll get that taken care of as well. I have seen actually holes in people's roof, but this isn't really too common. I haven't really seen a lot of Cherokees with holes in the roof. I mean, something may have happened where something may have nicked the paint off and it started to rust. But If you take good care of it, you drive it around casually, just age of the vehicle. Most common rust spot is definitely the floors, without a doubt. Another exterior problem with these is the doors. Mine has been done. You can see it's all welded there. Someone welded the door on, or welded the hinge on. But these hinges, they've used like some type of glue adhesive, and as time goes on, the doors will literally start falling off. Really, not really that big of a fix. All you have to do is just, you know, have someone weld it, and you should be good to go after that. That's another cosmetic things that happen to these. The two doors, I would imagine, would be worse because it's a lot more weight. I don't know, because I never had that issue with the door falling off since he welded it, but who knows, maybe the door had fallen off and that's why it's welded now. But I do know the doors will fall off of these because, like I said, it's like it's not welded on. They use like a glue adhesive, and as time goes on, the door falls. On the newer style Cherokees, this right here, the old styles, these usually work pretty well, but on the new ones, the hatch, there's like a mechanism in here. You actually can't see, you got to remove this plastic piece, but there's a mechanism in there, and a lot of times the hatch will not open up. That's another common problem with the hatch not opening up. That's kind of annoying, but once again, you can live without having it. It just, you know, what's the point in having an SUV if you can't open up the hatch? Something just kind of annoying. Sometimes the doors, they'll be a real pain to open. You gotta like really push the button in and pull. These operate pretty good. Some of the stuff, all you gotta do is just keep it lubricated, you know, like the door hinges here. I keep those greased up. I keep this greased up. Same with the latch. The hood latches, sometimes the hoods will stick because there's a latch here, and on the other side, they will stick sometimes. Just really keep them lubricated, guys, and you really shouldn't have an issue. So it's little common problems, nothing too crazy, just kind of annoyances over anything else. So now that's out of the way, we'll move into the interior. Some common problems with the interior in these Jeeps, from what I have seen. On the older ones, these handles, if you have this style handle, they'll tend to start ripping, and they'll have some play in them because there's like screws in the plastic. Not that big a deal, but something to keep in mind, you know, they'll get a little loose as time goes on. Another issue with the interiors in here is the seats. Usually, obviously, the driver's seat will get it worse because you're getting in and out. These seats are actually in really good shape, but there's different styles. The older styles have a lot more different style seats. You can get these, you can get the kinds I have in my white Jeep where it's a little bit more bolstered, and then this top part actually comes off. They have ones that are really bolstered, like sportier seats. I've seen those on like the 80s ones. They have a lot of different seats, and depending on which one you have, obviously you're going to get tear spots in different areas from getting in and out as the years go on. Like I said, these are in good shape. The newer style Cherokees, 97 and up, they, I think, all have the same style seat. I don't think I've ever seen like a sportier seat in those. I've only really seen one style. And they always crack right here, like the leather or pleather, whatever it is. This is always all torn up. This one's actually in good shape, which is kind of surprising. I don't think it happens as much on the older ones. I think it's mainly the new ones, but this starts getting all torn up. Nothing crazy, nothing to really, you know, gripe about, but it's something just, as time goes on, something to expect, something, you know, a little minor annoyance. Interior problems, I mean, you have electrical problems on these. I mean, it's a Jeep, you know, just expect electrical problems, as some people like to refer to as Jeep. I'm kind of fortunate. As of right now, all my electronics work, and they all work really well. But, you know, these are known for the radio going out, the windows not working anymore, door locks. So if you have a Jeep that's, you know, all has electric power, everything, just expect some type of issue down the line, whether your windows stop working or your power door locks don't want to work, or one day your radio just stops. These also have a problem with the clock spring. The clock springs will go bad, so your horn won't work. What else does the clock spring control? I forget. Really anything electronic in this. In fact, I have one electrical issue with this. My high beams, and I put my high beams on, the one light goes out, and my other headlight, the high beam comes on. But when I turn the high beams off, both of my lights work. So that's the one electrical issue that I have. I haven't really looked into it too much. I'm sure I'll figure it out eventually, but That is one electrical problem that I have. But I mean, really, expect anything electrical in this, just expect to go bad. I mean, that's just kind of how it is. I mean, even the headlight switch, the blinkers, you name it. They just, I don't know. There's certain, it's weird. Sometimes Jeeps will have no electrical issues, they're fine, and other ones, they have electrical problems galore. I guess it really just kind of depends on who made it, you know. I would definitely, 100%, I mentioned this in my other video, 100% just stay away from a 1997. Those have horrible electrical problems. It was like the first model year for the newer style, and they were still trying to figure out wiring for them and stuff. Those have really, really bad wiring problems. It's hard trying to find a wiring harness for them, from what I hear, because it's a weird year. So if you don't want to deal with, if you're going to get a 97, make sure it's manual everything, like no power at all. Manual windows, seats, I mean everything. Because otherwise you're probably going to have nothing but electrical problems. And you're still going to have to deal with electronics, you know, in the dashboard, you know, your speedo, stuff like that. You're going to have to deal with all those electronics. But at least it's a lot better than not having windows and your headlights going out. So I would try to stay away from a 97, but if you are going to get one, try to get one that has manual everything, because those are definitely the biggest problem with the newer style Cherokees. Is just the 97s are notorious for electrical issues. So what's another interior issue? The dashboards will crack as time goes on. That's not too common. I have seen the dashboards crack. In fact, I have a little tiny crack. Sometimes it just happens right there. It's not that bad at all. You can't even you can see it on video. Little tiny crack right there. My white Jeep has a little crack like right here. So the newer style, these are like plastic, like more plastic than these are. This is like a rubbery plastic. I don't know how to explain it. The new ones are just plastic, and they can crack and break. Once again, you get one cheap from the junkyard, or you know, buy a brand new replacement one. Not that big a deal. These break all the time. The clips to hold this down, once again, not a big deal, but like every Cherokee, this breaks. You know, it kind of just happens with age. What else in the interior? Expect leaks. You know, I had the vent windows here. These don't leak, fortunately. If it rains hard enough, I think a little bit does come in, a little bit of water, but it's not that bad. You know, I've seen Jeeps, you know, where it rains and they just have a whole puddle on the floor. So definitely keep in mind for leaks. That's kind of that could be an exterior and interior problem, because it's obviously an exterior issue leading to the interior. But I'll lead it for the interior problems, because obviously you don't want water inside your car. But that is something that can go bad with these, and you know, that actually can be expensive, trying to fix a leak somewhere, because you know, if you got to put a new windshield in or take apart your dash, that can get expensive. A windshield, you know, probably $300 to install, but if you got to take apart your whole entire dash to fix a leak somewhere, you know, that can get kind of pricey. So something just to kind of keep in mind. The headliner sagging, once again, that's another common problem I don't have, which I'm kind of fortunate with. What else is a common problem? Speakers going out, because the wires, as the years go on, the doors opening and closing, pinches the wires, and it can mess with the speakers. That could also affect your power windows and locks. So another thing to keep in mind. Really, interior, guys, just to sum everything up, interior is electrical issues. Just expect electrical problems. I mean, that's really it for the interior. And expect the seats get a little torn up as the years go on. But that's kind of normal. Another thing that I like to point out too with the interiors, not a big deal, but it happens on every Cherokee, whether you have one built in 1984 or one built in 2001, is things in the interior like to creak and rattle. You know, there's noises that you'll hear, this, you know, the rear seat screeching, or, you know, see if I can make the noise here. You know, this, oh, well, mine doesn't squeak that bad actually, but there's little squeaks. A lot of times they'll squeak right here, and they go ee, and you hit bumps and stuff. Like my speaker, whatever they call that, speaker bar, sound bar, speaker thing, that bounces around a little bit. So, you know, just expect interior noises. Doesn't bother me. If I were to daily drive this and hear it every day, I'm sure after a while it'd get kind of old, but since I don't daily drive this, not that big a deal to me. All you gotta do is turn on the radio and you don't hear it anymore. But you know, just something to keep in mind too, that the interiors in these can be a little noisy sometimes. All right, now we move on to mechanical. All right, and the common problems you'll expect mechanically with these. We'll start with the rears. Depending on what axle you have, and depending on what you do with the Jeep, we'll keep the Jeep stock. We're not going to do any type of lift kits, nothing like that. If you have a Dana 35, you should be okay. As long as you don't do burnouts and act stupid and just drive it normally, your Dana 35 should hold up. If you have an 8 1/4, you'd be a lot better. You could probably jump it and whatever else you want to do if you wanted to, if it was stock, and probably not really have any issues. So depending on what rear you have, it's possible you may have a little bit of a hiccup if you have a Dana 35, but usually Dana 35s are okay when they're stock and left alone. But you would be better off with an 8 1/4. Drive shafts, expect a little bit of play in the drive shaft as time goes on. You know, you just need some new U-joints. Once again, not that big a deal, but it is common, you know, for the drive shafts to start getting some play where the joints are. I mean, that kind of happens with age. It really happens with any vehicle. It's not necessarily a common problem on just Cherokees. It's really any vehicle that has a drive shaft that can really happen with. Leaks, expect leaks. Expect the leak right back there by the axle seal, whatever they call that hooks up to your drive shaft. Anywhere that there's a rubber seal and there's fluid behind it, expect a leak, no matter what it is. Whether it's the leaking from the differential, leaking from the seal, leaking up by the transfer case, you know, whatever, the pinion seal, the slip yoke. If you have a slip yoke eliminator, you probably won't have a leak there anymore because I think it eliminates the seal. I don't know, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, but expect anywhere that there's fluid, whether it's an automatic and you have automatic transmission or it's a manual, expect leaks. Except for the manuals. I don't really think the manuals really leak too often. I think it's usually the autos that may leak a little bit. But engine leaks, the rear main seal goes bad in these. Expect coolant leaks. I mean, you know, a lot of times the radiators, as they get older, they'll get a little leak in it. The water pump, you know, expect leaks. And now that we're talking about the radiator and the water pump and stuff, the biggest mechanical issues with these, without a doubt, 100%, the biggest reason why Cherokees get stuck on the side of the road or people blow them up or have engine problems is because they overheat them. Overheating is the #1 problem with these Jeeps. That is the biggest issue. And if you have one of these, you need to keep your coolant levels perfect, and you need to have your coolant system operating 100%. You got to make sure your fluid is clean, everything is functioning properly. Even if one hose is like clogged up or not flowing properly, these will overheat. It's the fact that these Jeeps were never designed to have this motor in them. They originally came with a GM V6, and they also came with a 4-cylinder in them. Well, the GM V6 was underpowered and just wasn't a good motor. So a couple years later, I believe in 86, they put the 4.0 into the Jeep. You know, they were able to wedge it in and get it to fit in. But the motor was never intended to fit inside of this engine bay. If you look, we'll pop the hood. If you look at the motor inside the engine bay, you can see they really wedged it in as much as they can to get it to fit. Now, if it was a V6 they put in here, it probably would have fit better. I'll put you down for just a second. It's not horrible, the fitment in here. You can see the fitment is not horrible. You have room to work on it, not too bad. But it's really shoehorned all the way in the back, right by the firewall. There's not a lot of room up front, so you can't put big radiators. You can tell this motor really wasn't meant to be put in here, just by looking at it. You know, then the motor, the way it's angled, it's very close to the hood. These are notorious for overheating and getting heat soak. And the older ones, they'll literally misfire because the fuel rail here gets so hot, and then it starts affecting the fuel, like it turns into vapor. Doesn't get proper fuel. I mean, that also has to do with the injectors. The Jeeps are really known to overheat, and I'm going to say that's the biggest mechanical issue with these, is just overheating. So if you want to avoid that, keep cool coolant, not cool coolant, what am I saying? Keep clean coolant, keep it topped off, make sure your mechanical fan is working well, and also make sure your electronic fan is working. You need both fans. You need to have both fans. If you don't have an electric fan, as soon as you get in traffic, you're going to be screwed. Maybe just driving down the road, you'll be okay, but as soon as you get stuck in any type of traffic, you don't have an electrical fan, you are screwed. Your Jeep is going to overheat. You're going to have to sit there and rev it and hope the mechanical fan can try to push some of the air out. What else? Just keep the water pump, keep the coolant in top shape. That's really all to it. If it starts overheating, you can add a larger radiator, maybe a higher flow water pump. Make sure your hoses are good. Just really keep an eye on your coolant. As long as you do that, you really should have a Jeep that will go 300,000 miles. Just change the oil. That's really about it, guys. Another quick thing that I want to bring for another common problem, just thought of it as soon as I got home, is the exhaust manifolds. Just really the whole entire exhaust system to begin with. The exhaust manifolds crack, the mufflers get all rotted out, holes in the pipes, and the catalytic converters go bad. So just another little quick thing that I just remembered now is the exhaust systems on these. They're pretty notorious for having some issues as well. These motors are known to tick a little bit sometimes they even knock a little bit, make a little bit of noise. I've seen Jeeps that are have a rod knock and they put another 30,000 miles on them. So depending on how bad it is, I've seen people drive around motors that are kind of tired and beat up and they're still going fine. Maybe not fine, but they're still going. In fact, I actually knew someone that had a Jeep Cherokee. I forget what year it was. I think it was a 99. It was either a 99 or a 98. And he was driving around on 3 cylinders. The thing was horrible. It had death wobble, which we're going to get into in a second. Had death wobble. Everything. He couldn't go past 40 miles an hour. It ran hot a lot. But that Jeep always ran. Even though it was running on 3 cylinders, it burned oil, the thing still ran. So these motors they're really hard to kill. Just keep clean fluids, keep the coolant good, and you're good to go. Transmission-wise, they're really solid, the transes. If you have a 5-speed, the synchros will start getting a little bit tired as they get older. That's kind of common with any car, really. It's not necessarily just for the Jeep Cherokee, but just the 5-speeds will start getting a little tired as they get older. That's just kind of how it is. They're not that expensive to rebuild. You could probably get it fully rebuilt, new gears, new synchros, probably for around $800 to get the trans fully rebuilt. So that's really not that bad. And the last thing that most people, at least with stock Jeeps, won't have, but it can happen. If you have a stock Jeep, you can possibly get death wobble. Now on Jeeps that are lifted, have bigger tires, it's very common. Unless you have the 1-ton steering like I have. If you have just the stock setup and you lift it, don't be surprised if you experience some death wobble. It's common with Jeeps really in general, not just Cherokees, Wranglers, whether it's a TJ, YJ, even the brand new JLs are having death wobble issues, and that's actually from the factory stock. They're having death wobble issues, which is kind of funny. Usually stock Cherokees don't have death wobble issues with their stock. It's usually when they're lifted and stuff. But another thing to keep in mind, now that can get expensive depending on what it is. If you do what the guy did to this, he just converted to the 1-ton steering. I don't know how much the setup was, but let's say it's $400. That's not too bad. But if you deal with the stock setup, there's a lot more components you have to deal with, and sometimes it's harder to diagnose. Could be ball joints, could be hubs, could be your tie rod, track bar. There's really a lot that contributes to death wobble. Could be a factor of multiple things, just one thing. Sometimes even tires being out of balance. can affect something enough. The front ends on these are not complicated, but you know, anything with a solid front axle sometimes can be a little bit more difficult to diagnose problems with than if it was independent front suspension, and vice versa. Sometimes independent front suspension can be a little bit more difficult than a solid front axle. I personally prefer solid front axle on things, but death wobble is an issue that solid front axle vehicles can get. So, what's another thing? This is usually also for lifted vehicles, not stock. But over here is your steering box. If you put too much stress on this part of the frame, your like really big wheels and stuff, you can crack the frame here by the steering box. It will actually pull apart the unibody. That does happen quite a bit, but that's really only if you're lifted. If it's stock, you shouldn't really have any issues at all. And I think that's pretty much it, guys. I don't know what other common problems are on these things. For the most part, they're pretty damn solid, you know. To sum everything up, I'd say the main issues with these is 1, electrical. You're probably going to experience some type of electrical issue. 2, overheating. At some point, you may have an overheating issue. Just make sure you keep the fluids clean. You change the coolant regularly. Just make sure it looks good. Make sure everything's functioning properly. And number 3, rust. Just be wary of rust. I mean, you know, if you live in Arizona, you can take this one off the list, but if you're somewhere like the Salt Belt like we are, or like I am, you know, just keep in mind, you know, rust can be an issue on this. And the 4th and final thing I'm going to say is death wobble. You know, they get death wobble, guys. It just kind of happens, especially when they're lifted. If it's stock, you should be okay. Oh, one last thing. I just remembered it now. The 2000 and 2001 Jeep Cherokees, their cylinder heads are known to crack. Not that big of a job, you know, something like that. The cylinder head's like $300, depending on where you get it from. You can get a reman head from like Clearwater, I think it is. They're like $300. And then, you know, to have someone install it. I would imagine a job like that, it's probably like a 5-6 hour job. You might also do the head gasket wire there too, do head bolts. So you're probably in that job in parts, probably somewhere around $500, $400. And then to have someone do it, you're probably in another $500, depending on how fast they can do it. I don't know what the book time is on it. I would imagine a job like that's probably like 5 hours or so. So depending on how cheap you can get the parts, you're probably in about $1,000 for a new cylinder head. Once again, not terrible if you get the Jeep cheap enough. Something just to, you know, keep in mind. Hey, listen, you know, have you ever replaced a cylinder head? Look at the coolant. If it looks kind of milky or brown, then you may have a cracked cylinder head and you're leaking coolant into your oil. So another common problem on these, but that's only for 2000 and 2001. The other years don't really have that issue. All right, guys, that's pretty much it. That's to the best of my knowledge here on what goes wrong with these Cherokees. From what I've seen on people's Cherokees and what I've also, you know, seen on forums and stuff. That's kind of, I'd say, mainly most of the mechanical problems, just issues in general that go on with these. So, that's it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and take care.